sometimes you'll have a character do something that's out of character, and then you get a story idea out of that. And so you break that. That's the intention of the episode. This character doing something out that they would never do. A character who's a shut-in or a loner, going on a blind date. They would never do that. So, that's all usually part of the plan. That's how you explore a character. So it doesn't really come as a surprise to me. I'm intentionally writing it that way. You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin. Hey everybody, welcome back to Screenwriters Need to Hear This. I'm Michael Jamin, and I'm here with, introduce yourself please, sir.
My name is Philip Alexander Hudson.
Incorrect. Yes, I'm here with Phil, and we're going to talk today. Today's called, we have a Q&A episode. So we did, every once in a while on my Instagram page at Michael Jamin Writer, Phil posts like a little tile that says, hey, send us your questions. And so you guys posted your questions, and I'm going to try to answer them as best as I can. And if I can't answer, I'll make something up.
Yeah. Now, I didn't filter these. These are just the questions that were asked. So some of these you might have asked in other lives. You do lives all the time where you answer people's questions there too.
And we post those, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we post those lives. When I do Instagram lives quite a bit. And Phil, you post them on my YouTube channel at Michael Jamin Writer.
They show up on the YouTube channel. Yep. So you can go there. There'll be a playlist that says past lives, and not as in past lives Michael's led, but as in past lives that Michael has hosted.
I like the name. I like that. I like how confusing that is, though. I like that.
I did it, and then I went back and I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is past lives that he's done."
All right,
life as an ice cream scooper. Life. Well, you ready to dive in?
Yeah, stump me, Phil.
All right. Lauren Fields asks, Michael Jamin Writer, how can one get into a writer's room on a TV show with little to no experience?
Well, when she says get in as a writer, I wonder if she means get in as a writer or get in as like an observer, or, we don't know.
I think there are several answers to the question. I think they're all valuable to hear.
So to get in as a person, or even to get paid to get in, like to be a fly on the wall in any writer's room, any professional writer's room, is invaluable. You will learn so much just by sitting in that room, listening to experienced writers talk and break story, which means figure out what a story is and what the act breaks are and how to unfold and all that character development. Like that's all gold. And the way to do that first is to get a job as a production assistant, which is a low-level, entry-level job. I said in one of my posts, I said it was basically a gopher, and some people got very offended. It's not a gopher. Okay, call it what you want.
It's menial, the lowest level of work you could possibly consider within the film world, and it's better than digging a ditch, which I've done for a living. So it's much better than that. You get free drinks and free food.
Yeah,
it's not bad, but it's not glorious.
It's not glorious. Yeah. So you could do that, and then hopefully you buddy up to the writer's assistant. Learn how to. The writer's assistant is the person in the job who assists the writers. Basically, they type the script, literally type it as the writers pitch lines. The writer's assistant will often type it. Often they do the formatting. They do the distribution of the script, among other things. They deal with clearance sometimes, and so that is not an entry level job. You have to learn how to do. That's the job you want, because now you're in the writer's room, and so to get the job as writer's assistant. Great ways to start off as a PA and try to hone your way to get that writer's assistant job. And the way to do that is by hanging out with the writer's assistant, asking how they do their job, and hopefully they get sick or they choke on a pretzel, and then you jump in.
Well, and let me ask you a question. When you say you got hired as a production assistant, do you mean like a set PA, an office PA, a post PA, or a writer's PA? Are you referring to a writer's PA?
Writer's PA, that's the best job, but you want to get any job you can get. As I say, the closer you can get physically to the job that you want, and this woman wants to get into the writer's room, the closer you can get physically, the better. So writer's assistant would be best. One step below that would be writer's PA, and they basically serve the writers doing whatever needs to be done, making copies or doing whatever it needs to be done. And then moving a little further out might be a set PA or an office PA. Your goal is just to try to keep moving that job to get a little closer to the writer's room physically.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Makes sense. And I've had all of the PA jobs. Like I've done them all. So I'm familiar with them.
Yeah.
So that's how you get in. That's how you get in adjacent to the room. What what about the answer to the question? How can one get into a writer's room staffed with little to no experience?
Yeah, I mean, one way to do that is become a writer's assistant, and hopefully you can get a script out of it, a freelance script. Another way is to be like an amazing writer, to have a bunch of samples and get your script into the hands of agents and producers and writers and get seen. But you can also, that advice is a little old. It's kind of like 30 years old. But now with social media, people have made names for themselves by themselves by writing their own material and putting it up on YouTube and building a following of their own mini channel. And
Mhm.
then Hollywood will come to you. So there's more ways to break in now than there were 30 years ago. So I'm just kind of I'm teaching you the standard way, but think outside of the box too. That's fine.
Right. Right.
You know.
Okay. Awesome. Any other thoughts on that question?
No, it sounds like she's gunning for my job, and I don't like that.
Yeah. All right. L. Barker Film asks, why do the amounts in your residual checks vary so much? And
I don't
context
know.
there for people. Michael will often on TikTok and Instagram share his residual checks. The fabled green envelope, which I had heard of and never seen until Michael shared it the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So why does it varies? Because you'll get more if the show's worth more. Every time the show reruns, I get a piece. I get a piece of if I wrote the episode. But some of my shows don't rerun a lot because there's not a lot of demand for them. And other shows that I wrote rerun a lot, like King of the Hill. It runs it everywhere, and so that's why I get more money for shows like that. And sometimes these shows they run overseas, and so I can't keep track of that. I don't keep track of how often my shows air. How could I possibly? Sometimes like a show will air on an airplane. You don't even know. So the Writers Guild keeps track of that, and so sometimes the checks are big and sometimes they're small, and I don't complain as long as they keep coming.
Love it. All right. Grooven Butterfly says,
Moving butterfly.
do you think that the number of streaming platforms has made it easier to craft a successful career as a screenwriter or more challenging because there are way too many choices?
Yeah, I think it's easier now to break in as a screenwriter because there really is a lot more content. There's a lot more out there. But I do think it's a little harder to make a career out of it. It was never easy. I think it's a little harder now just because the series orders are shorter. Back in the day, you'd be on network and you might do 22, 24 episodes a year. And now, if you're on a streamer, you'll do 8 or 10, and that's it. And so now, okay, that 8 or 10 will take you a few months, and now you got to find another job. Whereas before you could basically work year round on this show.
May I piggyback off that question with another question?
Yeah.
I believe at a time that was one of the problems with the shortened series orders was, you were on basically lockdown, contracted to that show
Hmm.
for a year, and that meant you couldn't get staffed on another show, but your 22 episodes that you hoped for were reduced to 8 or 10 episodes, so you made less
Hmm.
money and you couldn't get another job. Is that still the case in the industry, or?
Now, basically, if you the guild is working out protections as this is becoming a problem, and I believe it's actually becoming less of a problem now. So for the most part, you'll be on a show. If it's 8 episodes, the contract will say how long they have you for, and
It's
so
a certain number of weeks, right? Because I've had to fill out
often that's
paperwork
how
on
it's
that.
done. Yeah, it used to be I get paid per episode produced, and now I see I'm starting to get paid more on a weekly basis. So that's fine too.
Got it. Okay. Great. Philip K. Ryder asks, where do you send spec scripts for Family Guy?
You don't. There you go, Philip K. Writer. You don't. They don't want your scripts. If you send it to them, it'll go right in the garbage. If you want to be a writer on Family Guy, then you got to come up the process start listening to our podcast, and you'll hear how people get jobs as staff writers. But you can't send your script anywhere. No one's going to look
Yeah.
at it because they don't want to get sued. It'll go right in the garbage.
I only
So
personally know of one show that famously did that. It was Star Trek Next Generation, where you could submit spec episodes and they would read them
interesting.
and then they would hire them, or they would hire people off them. A lot of people got their starts doing
I didn't
that.
know that. Wow.
Yeah, but that's the only one that I've ever really heard of. And you could just kind of point out how paranoid these companies are of being sued for
Hmm.
piracy and stealing your content. Um, you know, one of the writers in your course, Dave Crossman, he wrote a spec, Rick and Morty, that is very funny. Everyone who's
Hmm.
read it says it's hilarious. And he's a contractor for Warner Brothers Video Games. He works in the analytics department, so completely separate from Rick and Morty, nothing to do with the TV production. They just hired him on as a full time staff member, and he had to disclose any intellectual property that he's written related to stuff they own. And he had to send them copies of all of the spec scripts for any property that he's written that they
Hmm.
own. And anytime he updates them, he has to resend it to them and they have to evaluate it before he can send it out just to make sure that he's not, they've documented that they didn't steal his ideas
Right.
as
Right.
an employee.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
So they're very locked down on that kind of stuff. They're
Yeah.
not going to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, okay. Doot. What is your advice for the writing dialogue for, excuse me, what is your advice for writing dialogue without it seeming unnatural or stiff?
Well, one good way to work on that is to record it into your phone or whatever and play it back. And does it sound natural or not? Another way is just to go to a coffee shop and listen, eavesdrop on how people talk and record their conversation. If it's probably illegal, but listen to how they talk and imitate it. And often people, someone said, "Do you have to?" Do you have to know perfect grammar to be a good writer? It's like only if your characters speak perfect grammar. If your character is Fraser Crane, then yes. But if your character is not,
Mhm.
you have to write naturally. They talk the way they talk, and many people don't speak with perfect grammar. So that's how that's how your character. That's how you should write your character.
Yeah, I would point out too that that doesn't mean that you can get away with punctuation and spelling errors in your script,
Yeah,
right? Because those
right.
are reasons why people will stop reading your script. But there's programs like Grammarly that you can copy your scenes into, take the advice you want, copy it back into Final Draft, and that's something I do, just to find, oh, look at all of the commas that Mrs. Johnson in third grade didn't teach me I needed to use, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't have any spelling mistakes in your script. That just looks like you don't care, or
Yeah,
because especially now, and most programs will have if you type a word in incorrectly, there'll be an red underline. They're like, well, you have a program. It says you spelled it wrong, so Google how to spell it right.
yeah,
What's your excuse?
yeah. Okay, awesome. Uh, Solomon Lovejoy, what stage or era in your life did you realize you had a real shot at being a professional writer? You've mentioned the Warner Brothers program, but was there any time before that when you felt you would make it?
Yeah, and I address this a little bit in the video, and you never do. You never think you're going to make it, and so you keep on writing and writing, and that process of writing improves your writing. And so the short version of that story I did in a post, and someone can go dig that up. But basically, I teamed up with my writing partner, and and we started writing together, and frantically. So we met every day after work, nights, weekends, holidays, and we wrote script after script after script. And every time we finished one, we go, okay, let's write another one. Let's write another one. Maybe we can make one that's better and better and better. And it was what the first one, ironically, was the one that got us a job on Just Shoot Me. But we had written, I don't know, 6 or 8 more after that. And
Mm,
but so because we were never convinced it was good enough. And then when we got on Just Shoot Me, having written all those scripts gave us a little more confidence so that we wouldn't get fired off Just Shoot Me. But even I was going to do a separate post on this. You know, we got hired and then we worked and worked. In the first 10 to 12 years of your career, you really don't know what you're doing. You're relying on older, more experienced writers to help guide you. And you listen, okay, yeah, you're right, okay. And then you get to a point, at least I did. I got to a point, halfway through my career, like, okay, I know how to do this now. I know how to write. I know how to write. And then you start writing more and more. And then you get to a point where you get so good, you go, okay, I don't know how to write. You know what I'm saying? That's when you know
mm,
you're a writer. Is when you realize, okay, maybe I don't know how to write. I've gotten so
mm.
far that I now can question things that I do and realize, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And then, so you never really are convinced that you're, if you're going to be honest, you're never really convinced that you're any good. So,
Yeah, and there's a mental model for this. It's called the Dunning Kruger effect. I think we might have mentioned
mhm.
it before, right? But
Yeah.
it's that the inverse relation to the amount of information you know and their belief set that you're an expert in that thing. So people who are just learning about something think that they are far more advanced in that thing than they actually are. And then you get to a point where you actually know a lot and you still don't feel like you know anything. And then
Right.
you ultimately end up in a point where you're like, okay, I know how to do this job. And at that point, you're probably a master at that thing. You know it quite well, but you're still doubting yourself up until that point.
That was, I mean, that was the whole beginning when we started putting together this course. When Phil, you're like, you got to put together a course. I'm like, what do I know? You
Yeah.
know, because after writing 26 years, I don't know, Phil. What do I know?
Yeah,
So,
but I have conversations with people. You know, again, being in the course, I get content from or scripts from people. I rate them, I give notes, and they do the same for me. And I was just having a conversation with one of the writers in your course over the weekend, and they were like,
mhm.
actually, no, it was Monday. It was a couple days ago, and he's like, I challenged myself to write an entire spec in 5 days, a pilot. And I did all the work. I gave myself a couple days to work out the characters, break the story, and then I wrote it and he got it and gave it to me. And it was like, it was great. He definitely had some structural issues he needed to fix, but it was still much better than most things I get. And he said, yeah, what was really helpful was I would just hop on and I would listen to Michael's lessons again. And I just find these little nuggets that he's talking about that I
Yeah.
just didn't pick up the first time. And I was like, I 100% resonate with that because I feel the same way. And that's, I think, the beauty of advancing in this stuff is if you're a perpetual student, you're constantly trying to learn, you're going to pick up on the nuances that you as a pro don't even realize you're saying because they're so common to you,
Yeah.
right?
And to that note, I should show you this. So I had, this is my book. This is my book. It looks like a fourth grade book, but of all the notes that I've compiled from being on TV shows, working with other writers, and someone would say something smart and I'd write it down. And then, and I look at it every, I don't know, once a year or every other year. And I always find something different, even for me. Because you look at it with a different lens. I go, oh yeah, that, you know, that helps. That helps now. It didn't help last year, but it helps now. Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
All right. Epple seed, EPLLE seed. What are some important things to remember when pitching yourself for staff writing opportunities?
What is important things to remember? Well, you don't want to. I guess you don't want to oversell yourself. But you want to sell who you are and what you can offer in the room and the voice and you. I guess humility is also important. You don't want to. When you're going to be in the room, one thing that if you've gotten to that point, the showrunner's already read your script and they're like, okay, I like this person's writing. Now, can I be in the room with them for 14 hours a day? Are they going to drive me crazy? And so that's important. It could be a personality test. Is this person going to drive me nuts, or are they going to help, or are they going to hurt? And
I've
so
heard that called the pants test. Will this person wear pants? Does this person wear pants to the interview? Because you pass the writing thing, are we going to be able to sit in a room for each other for 12 hours a day?
Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay. Awesome. I'm assuming that question means that they've already passed this step of they have a good sample. They might be on general meetings with people, and now they're pitching themselves to be in a room. Because I don't know where else you'd be pitching yourself to be a staff writer unless you're DMing people on social media. Your feelings on DMing showrunners in social media?
I mean, I don't like it, but I mean, like sometimes people reach out to me like, hey, if you ever like, I'm not hiring now. The odds of me hiring when exactly when you need me, and it doesn't even work that way. People come through channels. They come usually through the agents or managers, and which means they've already cleared a hurdle. Which means they've because everyone thinks they have a great script. Everyone thinks they have a great script. It's very rare. So I don't want to read 1,000 scripts to find one good one. I'd rather read 100 scripts to find one good one. And that's what it is when you come through the agents. It's like 100. You got to find that diamond in the rough. And so
and that's what you said, right? You're literally praying for there to be a good script.
Yeah,
because
I'm not.
You got to stack.
That's exactly
on your
right.
desk.
I'm praying because I don't want to read another one. I'm like, just give me a good one so I can stop reading this and go on to do whatever else I have to do.
Have you ever found yourself
it's not enjoyable? Hmm?
Well, I was going to ask, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're reading and you're like, oh, the script's good? Do you just stop on that one, or do you find yourself in a situation where you read them and you're like, I've got two really good options here. Now let me see which one I want to hire?
Yeah, and sometimes, and when that happens, uh, often you can't even get that person. They've already got a job because
Mm,
they're good.
yeah.
So it doesn't happen often, but when you do, it's like what a relief. Phew! I put this in a separate pile. Great, let's move on. And even often if they get to, I remember one guy I read, and we hired him. I liked Act One. I liked Act Two. I didn't like Act Three. I was like, good enough, good
Mm.
enough. We can fix Act Three.
I think you've famously to me, maybe to some other people who listen, you've said that it's like casting. One person's going to get the job, so everyone else is going to be disappointed. Doesn't matter how you get to that point where that one person is happy.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you view this as well, right?
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, yeah. You know, try to get
Got
the
it.
best.
Shimon 7373. How do you find ways to clear your head to come up with some of your best work?
You know, it's not like I clear my head and hope inspiration strikes. I don't have a muse. It doesn't come to you in my sleep or in a dream. It's like you bang your head against the wall and you think. I sit down and I bounce off ideas, often with my partner, and it's hard work. It doesn't just come to me, and my head doesn't have to be clear. I literally sit down and I start writing ideas. Like, what if this? I start thinking about ideas. So
Mm.
yeah, that's the hard part. But again, and I've said this before, but you don't need a great idea. You need a good idea, but you have to execute it great.
Mm.
Takes a lot of pressure off when you think of it like that.
Yeah, it does. This might be a little too there. We've talked about this, I'm sure. What would you consider to be a good idea? Like, what is the benchmark of a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about this in the course. We literally go through how to do this, but it basically a good idea is an idea that has enough meat on the bones to sustain whether it's a half hour, or hour long, or feature. You have to have enough meat on the bones, enough conflict between these characters with some kind of emotional weight to it, and that's a good idea. Uh, but sometimes people come up with that. Here's an idea, and they go, "That's a joke. That's a funny scene. That's a funny
Mm.
moment." But it's not a good. That's not, you know, that's not going to sustain a half hour or longer. So
The longer I do this and the longer I try to write things, the more I recognize most of the ideas I thought were gold and most of the ideas people pitch me are really that. They're just funny moments or little
yeah,
interesting things that have happened, but they
yeah,
don't have the emotional weight you need to tell a 30-minute story.
yeah. And we teach that again in the course.
Mhm.
michaeljamin.com/course if you're interested.
So, all right. I am Sir Dice, I think. SRDCE.
Hmm.
How do you know what beats should be before an act break in an episode of television with more than two commercial breaks?
How do I know what beat goes before an act break?
Yeah, how do you know what beats should be before an act break in an episode of television that has more than
Hmm.
two commercial breaks?
Yeah, so that's called story structure. That again is what we teach in the course, and so that's called breaking a story. And so there is a procedure. There's a process that we use to do. You know, what's the bottom of Act One? That's the act break. What's the middle of Act Two? What's the bottom of Act Two? What's the top of Act Three? And so these are moments. How do we know? This is what I teach. It's like it's not. There's no easy answer to that. It's a it's a long process, but that's called story breaking, and that's everything. So we don't start writing until those moments are figured out on a whiteboard. And then you start after it's figured out. And that could take 3 to 5 days. Then someone writes an outline that could take a week, and after that, then someone goes off and writing a draft. So how do we do that? That is story structure. That is the gold.
I, I had a really interesting experience too. The showrunner's assistant got COVID on our set. And
Hmm.
so I stepped in to basically assist the showrunners with my new position. I was available to do it. And so I was there. I was reading lines when people missed their lines. I was just hanging out on set around them the entire time we were there. And one of our showrunners was having a conversation with one of the day players, one of the actresses, and they were talking about writing. And I just happened to walk in the room and he goes, "Hey, Phil, how good is your first draft?" And I was like,
Hmm.
"Never good. It's, quote, the shit draft," end quote,
Yeah.
right? It's the bad version. And he goes, "See, it's never good, but what it does is it allows you to see what works and what doesn't so that you can fix what you thought would work in the outlining stage." And
Yeah.
so, that's something that you talk about all the time is writing is rewriting, and you got to be okay
Hmm.
getting through that first version so that you can ultimately craft the best version of that story as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Right.
hey, guess what? Many times my own characters surprise me by their behavior. What's the biggest surprising action one of your characters has done that was completely outside of your original plan?
I don't know. I wish I had an easy answer for that. Like sometimes you'll have a character do something that's out of character, and then you get a story idea out of that. And so you break that. That's the intention of the episode. This character doing something out that they would never do. A character who's a shut-in or a loner, uh, going on a blind date. They would never do that. So that's all usually part of the plan. That's how you explore a character. So it doesn't really come as a surprise to me. I'm intentionally writing it that way.
Got it. And I think that as well, this might come from the sit down and just write what comes out process, not the take days and days and days and break the story and then write your book report and then write your outline and then write your first draft. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Derry Avac. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm butchering your names. What do you do when you have a deadline for a script, but you're not inspired?
Too bad if you're getting paid and you have a deadline. I'm not inspired is not the excuse the studio is going to hear. They're going to say, oh, well, okay, well, you're fired. Yeah. That's how it goes. So you got to write when you're not in the mood. You got to write when you're not inspired. That's part of the job. And so when you're not inspired, like you got to fall back on story structure. I've told this story a million times, so I'm only going to tell the brief version. But on 9/11, I was a writer on King of the Hill. The planes hit the towers. Everyone was devastated. And those following, weeks and months, no one at work was in the mood. No one was inspired to write comedy. No one was. But that's the job. So we would show up to work and we would make jokes. And we all felt a little guilty about it. We weren't even laughing so much, but we had to do it. So, it felt a little disrespectful. So someone would say something that was funny and no one would really laugh, but someone would say, yeah, that's good. So this is the discipline part of writing. And this is why you fall back on your knowledge and training of, story structure and all that stuff. It's like, you don't wait for inspiration.
Yeah, this is so right on the nose of what I'm going through in my own life right now, is just trying to instill the discipline of this. What does it mean to be a professional writer? I get distracted with my businesses and with all the other things I have going on, being a dad, being a husband. So it's like, what is the discipline of being a writer? And that means you get up at 4:30, you give yourself 30 minutes to wake up, and you write for at least an hour every single day, because no one else can bother you between 5 and 6 in the morning. And at 6 in the morning, well, that's 8 a.m. on the East Coast. And now I've got clients messaging me about pre-morning calls. And there's a guy I love. Yeah.
or me messaging you.
Michael waking up and just in his bed texting me things I need to do. But there's I don't know if you want to call him an influencer, but there's a leadership expert, former Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, and his motto is discipline equals freedom. And I think we often think of discipline as the opposite of that. Discipline is punishment, and it's not. Right, you will rise to the level of your discipline. Motivation will fail. Stop relying on motivation. Just rely on the habit that you have instilled. This is what I do, because a writer writes.
Yeah.
Right. And exactly. If we ever have a t-shirt, it's going to be Michael saying, writers write. If you haven't written today, you have written.
Yeah. We got to get in the t-shirt business.
Love it. All right. Cocked.mp4. How do you know you have a good script? I think I asked that question a little bit earlier, so I'm going to jump to
you give it, I've answered this, so but you give it to someone. You give it to your mom, your friend. It's someone who's trusted. You rip off the title page. You say, hey, can you read this for me? And then they're going to say, did you write it? And you're going to lie. You're going to say, no, I didn't write it. And I just want your thoughts on it. And then they're going to say, what do I know? I'm not a Hollywood executive. I'm not a producer or a director. I wouldn't know what a good script is. And then you say, write this down. You say, no, I just want you to read it and tell me, did you want to turn the page? Were you engaged in the story? When you got to page 20, did it feel like a homework assignment? Or were you like, ooh, do I want to read page 21 now? That's a good story. And that doesn't matter whether it's a comedy or drama or whatever, thriller, Then give them a week or so to read it. They come back and then you say, so what did you think? And if they give you one of this, if they give you, well, it's okay. No, there were parts I like. If they give you that, it's not ready. It's not ready. That's just and that is your audience. Your mom, your friend, anybody that's your audience. So you don't need an expert. You don't need an expert to tell you whether your script is good or not. You need an amateur. You need anyone who's ever been entertained before.
Yeah, I think I brought this up earlier too, but the script that we dropped, episode 33, the pilot that I wrote, that you were
Yeah.
kind enough to give me notes on, I knew I had something finally that I felt comfortable really putting out because I gave it to someone and they said I popped open a beer, I sat down, and then at the end I realized I hadn't touched my beer. And I don't
Yeah.
even normally like these kinds of stories. So I was like, okay, check that one off. I finally got something that's worth passing around here.
Yeah. That's a good story. Right.
Yep. Now I got to do a lot more of those.
Yeah.
So, all right. John Acosta, 02. With so much content being released on streaming services without commercials, do you still include teaser, act break, tag headings in your scripts?
Yeah, I do. I like to. And because even if you got to remember, it's kind of a personal decision. But when you break the story, you always put act breaks in it. As you're breaking it, those act breaks are super important, regardless of whether you're going to put act one or act two in the script or not. You have to break it that way. So if you decide to include it in the script, and it just depends. It's really a personal choice. You probably wouldn't in a movie, but on a TV show you might. In a streamer you might not. But if you do put it in, I will look at it, or whoever looks at it, and they'll zip to act one, and they'll say, okay, real fast. They go, after they read it, they go, let me double check that act one break. It just makes it easier for me to look at it. And if I see that act break pops, I go, ooh, that's good. Same thing for act two. So if it says act one and act two in the script, it makes it easier for me to find the act break. It tells me that you understand story structure, at least, because you know how to structure an act, whether you put, it just makes it easier for me to tell. So
yeah,
you don't have to do it though.
It's an interesting note. Yeah. Good question though. That was actually just something that came up over the weekend when I was reading someone's script and they didn't include them.
Right.
I found
you don't need to.
harder to read because they didn't. But
it might have been you probably found out, and it was probably rambled a little had they put it in and knew understand story structure, that act break would have popped. They would have made sure of it.
What's interesting now, because of you, I actually print off the scripts and I take a red pen and I do the peer review, and I will go in and I will write in where I think the beats are. And it's really interesting because then I put them on like a mini whiteboard on the front page, the title page, and then I'll with the page counts. And it's really clear you can see the problems in the script that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Oh, it took 9 pages to get to this beat, and then it took 2 pages to get to the end of this act.
Yeah,
and then
right.
You didn't, right? Okay, so there's a huge discrepancy in the way that happens. Mm-hmm. Very boring up front. Get to that faster, etc. Right. And you can just kind of really visualize those problems right there.
Yeah.
So, cool. Let's see. I am Shasha Snow. Revision seem to be a lot of what writing is. How many edits until you feel good enough to share your work with others or pitch your script?
Well, we have a deadline. So when my partner and I go off on script for a TV show, whatever, we get, let's say, a week to write the, outline, and then maybe a week to write the first draft. On Friday, we turn it in. So that's that. And then maybe we'll get notes on it and do a second draft. So that's it, because we are up against a deadline. But for other stuff that I write, my collection of personal essays, I have every draft saved on my computer, and I have some stories now, which I'm tweaking as we get closer to my show date, 50 drafts, 50. And the first draft doesn't resemble the final draft. As I get, drafts 40 through 49, we're talking tiny little things. Like I'll swap out a word or a joke, because it reminds me too much of another joke I did, so I'll swap it out. But yeah.
But on that note, I think the famous story is M. Night Shyamalan when he wrote The Sixth Sense. He wrote he did 60 drafts of it, and it wasn't until draft number 20 that he realized Bruce Willis was dead the whole time.
That's what made the movie.
20.
And that's what
drafts.
Made the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
That change made the movie.
Yeah, so. And one of my buddies who came out of this course, I met him because of the course, and we trade notes, and he's a script coordinator, and he credits your course for that because his writing was good enough. It got him that job. Someone was impressed with his writing. They recommended him for that. Now we're to the point where I read a script, and I'm like, hey, this is good. I have no structural problems with any of this. Your jokes are funny. Consider what if you change this to that, or what if you were to elevate this moment? And that's kind of at the point where he's like, okay, I'm good to do another polish on this, and I could put it
Right.
away as a sample now and move to the next thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and at that point, you're really just you're putting the fine details on it. You're just making it pop. You're making it shine.
Mm,
So that's great.
yeah. Follow-up question from I am Shasha Snow. How do you keep going with more edits or new ideas after you've been asked to make so many revisions already?
How do you keep? Depends who's asking you. How do you keep going? I
I
mean,
think it's also discipline, right? I think this goes back to just there's a discipline of just it's not motivation. You are writing it to write the best thing you can. And I think I can tell you, you put a post about stop polishing that turd, right? There's a
mm-hmm, move
point where you
forward.
have to realize this is as good as I can get this thing right now. And I have several of those where I'm like, oh man, I want to go back and rewrite that thing because now I know how to fix that problem I couldn't resolve
Right.
4 years ago when I wrote that thing.
hmm
But
I was gonna say it's possible that they're keep on spinning their wheels because they don't know how to do it, and so every
mhm,
time they make a change, it's not really making it better. It's just making it different because they don't know how to
mhm.
write yet. That could be what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. All right, 23 SCG. Can you list an episode from each series you wrote for that you're most proud of?
I would be hard pressed to list any episode from a series I wrote. We've written so much. I have boxes up there of scripts that I've read. I can name some from King of the Hill, but that was 20 years ago. I can name maybe a couple from Just Shoot Me. King of
I
the Hill.
imagine I was gonna say, I
uh,
imagine that some of these are the case studies you do in the course though, right? Because
Yeah,
you
maybe, but I just don't remember the stuff. I mean, honestly, I'm the worst person at remembering my stuff, but it's like it's because it's done. I'm always like, well, what I got to write something else now. Uh, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. On Marin, maybe people seem to like Dead Possum, but which was a fun episode. But we wrote so many after that. Like you could hold a gun to my head and say, list all the episodes you wrote, and oh my god, I'm gonna die because I can't remember. I would have to pull out my scripts and look at them. That's not the answer they want to hear, but it's just the truth.
yeah. All right. What am I Dylan has a follow-up question as well. He said, what is your opinion on writing, directing short films as a way of breaking into the business?
Um, if you submit it to a film festival and it gets a lot of attention, that's great. Sure, that's great. But if you putting something in, shooting it, and getting it up there, and having 5 people like it, and that's it. That's not going to help you. But the process of doing it is good, and you'll get better. Like I don't have a problem with that. Do it. Start making great stuff, but it has to be great. And you might make something great that doesn't get any traction. Write something else that's great.
Mm,
But mediocre is not going to help you. But the way to get better is by doing it. So that's what
mm.
I recommend.
Yeah, I think Matt Stone and Trey Parker from South Park, they went to, I think, the University of Colorado.
hmm
And the story that we were told in film school is they would write a new short film and shoot it every single weekend. So they were writing it on Saturday, shooting it on Sunday, editing it Sunday evening. And they did that 300 times. They had
Yeah.
300 short films under the belt before they made South Park as a Christmas card in LA.
Right.
And because of that, that's what launched their career.
Yeah.
So, in the martial arts world, we call it mat time, right? It's how much time do you have on the mat doing the work? Did you get your 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell would call it? And from
hmm
my perspective is, yeah, if you want to write and direct, do that. If you want to write, just write and write and write and write and write, right?
Yeah. People say like, yeah, I have a great idea. What should I do? Write it. What do you mean? What
Yeah.
do you mean? What should you do? Write it. You know.
hmm Right. All right. Malfunction. Is it possible for a network to pick up your idea but go with another screenwriter?
It's not likely. If I'm selling an idea, they want me, my partner, to write it. And because it's not so much the idea they're buying as the execution of the idea, and they want us. Uh, if it's someone who's less experienced, not likely. They will probably buy the idea, and then if they really like it, they'll maybe bring on a higher level to run the show. But yeah, I wouldn't. You don't really have to worry too much about someone buying your idea than hiring somebody else, because it's the execution that they're really buying. So
Yeah.
You know?
I think that question kind of speaks to a little bit of fear, right? This concern that people have, oh, they're going to steal my idea, which
Yeah.
I think kind of projects the scarcity mindset of I only have a good idea or I have a couple of good ideas instead of I'm a professional writer who can write all the time and can write whatever you give me and turn out something great from any idea you want to throw my way because that's my job as a writer.
Right.
You're a
Yeah.
freelancer. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And last question, AG7234 with another question here. What's your advice to someone who's moving to LA and want to start their journey on becoming a director in Hollywood?
Yeah. Well, similar, start directing stuff. I mean,
Go find a
yeah.
writer who wants to write and direct their stuff, right?
Yeah. Or exactly. I mean, you can write your own. That's fine. Or team up with someone and that's great. I mean, I say that actors should study writing, writers should study acting, and directors should study both, because you have to know how to honor the script. You have to know how to tell the story. You have to know how to talk to actors to get the performance from them. And then there's this whole third thing that you need to do, which is figure out where to put the cameras to best tell that story. Some people think it's only about the cameras, or it's only about talking to the actors or telling them, but you have to be able to understand. You have to understand how to interpret the script. So it's not like you're just like, oh, I think it should be this. Like the script tells you what to do, and you should be using that as your guide instead of just making it up.
It's the Spanish phrase for screenplay, guion, the guide.
Guion, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It guides you down the path.
It's not this thing, right? It's not this thing where it's like, I think I'm interpreting it like this. Like, you really shouldn't be interpreting it that much. You should be using it as a guide.
Yeah,
it should be telling you.
Right. Michael, awesome set of questions there. We're pretty long on this podcast for the day. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts for anybody listening about the process of being a writer, breaking into Hollywood, or anything you want them to do?
Yeah, you can subscribe to my watch list. Phil puts out my best content once a week, and it's free. It's like a free newsletter. You can go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist. You should be doing that. Obviously, you're listening to the podcast here. We got a YouTube channel. We put different stuff there. Other Q&As on our YouTube channel at Michael Jamin Writer. And of course, and for those of you who are ready to really dive in, we have a screenwriting course at michaeljamin.com/course. We got a lot of stuff, Phil.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I have to manage all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also we have something, this is kind of new. We now give away samples of my writing on our website for free. You can download that, right?
michaeljamin.com/story.
No,
what it is?
About these scripts.
Oh yeah. Oh, forgive me. That's right. People had asked for samples of your scripts, not just your essays. And so if you go to michaeljamin.com/about, right at the bottom, you'll see a link. It'll take you to Google Drive, and you can read actual produced screenplays or TV plays you've written, right?
Yeah, that's free. So you can go grab that. We're always trying to come up with ways to, how else can we help? So that's.
And I would just encourage you, write down the biggest takeaways you have. Leave them in the comments below. It's a way of locking it in for yourself and making sure that other people can learn your lessons as well, because different people are going to get different things out of this podcast and the things you're learning. So go ahead and leave those comments on Michael Jamin's website or in the notes in the comment section on YouTube, if that's where you're watching this.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks for your questions. Hope that helps.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.